I approve the next tranche of U.S. security assistance to Ukraine, including more artillery, more ammunition, more anti-tank weapons, and next week, the first U.S. Abrams tanks will be delivered to Ukraine. We also focused on strengthening Ukraine's air defense capabilities to protect the critical infrastructure that provides heat and light during the coldest and darkest days of the year.
Right. A year and a half later, we haven't delivered one tank. President Biden pledging another $325 million to Ukraine after hosting President Vladimir Zelensky yesterday at the White House. Meanwhile, Ukraine's neighbor to the west, Poland, says it's no longer going to supply Zelensky weapons. They're in a bit of a clash now over grain. This as Russia steps up its missile attacks this week in multiple Ukrainian cities. Here to react, Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired four-star General Jack Keane. General, Zelensky got rejected when asked if he could address a joint session of Congress from the speaker. There's some of the support that he had received in the past is beginning to get shaky. What's your message in all this?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, that $325 million, just to remind our viewing audience that that money does not go to the Ukrainians. The weapons go to the Ukrainians. The money goes to the U.S. defense industry to build those weapons that were taken out of our inventory to provide to the Ukrainians. That is a benefit to the American worker. The second thing is, I don't know what the politics are of not speaking to the joint session of Congress. Certainly he's done that. He's done that before. I recognize there is some opposition in the Republican Party to providing continued assistance to Ukrainians. When you look at the American people as a whole, the Reagan Institute, very credible poll, Gallup, very credible, 62 and 58% support Ukraine across the spectrum of the American people. There's bipartisan support in the Congress with the exception of a very vocal minority, certainly in the Republican Party. But the reality is, look, the administration has contributed to some of this, Brian. It's because we have provided the equipment intermittently as opposed to giving the Ukrainians what they needed last year to win. To win, not just to avoid losing, but to win. It's ironic now that all of the Europeans, with the exception of the Germans, have also come to that conclusion, admittedly slowly for some of them. France, Spain, and Italy are the last three to have joined the all-in. In other words, give them everything they need now. Why? To end the war quickly, to stop the suffering. Because the Ukrainians, if they have everything, have the capability to drive the Russians out. That is Zelensky's goal. And now we have the majority, overwhelming majority, Europeans agreeing with that. The president has never signed up for that. Where they are, Ukrainians, give them enough not to lose, but not enough to win, because that may threaten World War III. There's no evidence to support that conclusion after 18 months of involvement in this war.
And this is where Republicans should ask themselves. And I understand people spending money and the frustration that you just expressed. And the border has nothing to do with the Ukraine war, I hate to tell you. Number two is, do you want Russia to win because China wins? That's what you got to ask yourself. If you prefer to pull out, feel good about it, you just gave Russia a victory. They are loving the dissension. So I asked the General Secretary of NATO at the UN yesterday, the full interview will be on One Nation, Jens Stoltenberg, about what he should say to the American people about the support and why he should continue.
Yes, we are paying a price, but the price for not supporting Ukraine is much higher, because that will make us vulnerable. Then we will really be in a more dangerous situation, because then China will see that we are not willing to stand up for our values and protect democratic independent nations. That will be a much higher price to pay in the long run for the United States and for all the NATO allies.
And you have told me before, General, that nobody is studying the day-to-day operations more than China. So this is a fight against China.
Yeah, just think about what we just heard there. This is the head of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg. By the way, he served for a decade, and he's really quite extraordinary. He's got his eyes on two things, primarily. One is the war, certainly, with Russia inside Ukraine, and he has been committed to the all-in strategy right from the beginning. The second thing is China. He knows full well that if Russia wins in Ukraine, China wins, and that's an incentive for them to fulfill the promise that Xi has been making now for 10 plus years.